My name is Melanie Evans. I am a Spanish bilingual speech language pathologist. And what this show is all about is spreading cultural responsiveness, not only in our practices, but also our day to day lives. So I am so excited because I brought Dr. Angelyn Franks here on the show. Uh, Dr. Angelyn, the reason why I brought you on is because we were having a conversation on Instagram. And I believe it was because I just became certified as a mindset coach and I use subconscious mind techniques. Now, you also have a huge research background, which we're going to get into today in today's episode. And so I wanted to bring you on here because you really also have a focus on burnout and ADHD, which is something that I have. I don't ever want to say I suffer from ADHD because I actually think it's a superpower. At the same time, I know myself and my praxis coaching clients struggled during graduate school and even now when you were very vulnerable with me, and I hope you get to talk about it on the show today about
Yes.
experience in your doctoral program. I just really felt for everyone else who might be in their doctoral program and they might even be undiagnosed and just burning out. And I really want to reduce that. So
Yes.
I'm very excited to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'm going to say your introduction. And if you want to add anything, please do.
Okay, great.
All right. So, Angelyn Franks, SLPD, CCC, SLP, is a speech pathologist, researcher, and certified mindfulness informed professional. Her professional interests span a range of topics, including burnout, mindfulness based interventions, clinical supervision, and strategies for optimizing work related stress. Currently, Dr. Franks works as a teaching assistant within the SLPD program at Rocky Mountain University of Health Professions. Additionally, she is the VP, the Vice President for Speech Language Pathology for the Arkansas Speech Language Hearing Association and is an active member of the Business and Practice Management Topic Planning Committee for the 2024 ASHA Convention. So, wow, I am so honored to have you on the show today.
I'm so honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me. It's truly, I'm excited to talk about all the things I'm excited to, always to talk about.
Yes, yes. I'm sure all of this will just roll off of your tongue. I feel like you talk about this all
I don't
the
know about that, but maybe,
time. Yes,
hopefully.
totally. So could you tell us a bit about your why you joined the profession and why you decided to stay?
Absolutely. So I think my why is really similar to so many other SLPs. I love, I've always been just a helper, just a person who loves helping. And then I think it's so important to not only just give our clients a voice, but give our clients a voice for their, especially for their feelings and what they're feeling. And I think that is, it's so important. And I think regardless of, if the clients are using AAC or verbal language or sign, just giving our clients voices meant a lot to me as soon as I've learned about this profession. So that's why I went into the profession. And then I really think with my research and then also just kind of what I try to talk about a little bit on social media is that our ability to give quality care to our clients is so intertwined with, um, it's so deeply intertwined with our ability to care for ourselves. And I think we don't do that enough. We don't, or maybe we don't always do it enough and we don't talk about it enough. And there's so much burnout. And we were just talking before we came on, especially after the pandemic. So I think it's a really important conversation because our ability to continue to give to our clients is only going to continue if we can take care of ourselves.
100%. And you'll have to excuse me if there's a little pause because I mute myself. I have two 100-pound dogs who get really busy when I do things for some reason. But yes, I do want to say that there are people here who are very excited about this talk. Someone on LinkedIn, unfortunately, it doesn't ever tell me their name, but I'm very excited for the space and having you on here to cover such a wonderful topic. And we do have Miss Alice here. So we have a range of SLPAs on here, SLPs, and I know a few graduate students who expressed their excitement for this topic. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. I was actually thinking today because I was feeling really tired and run down. And I decided to give myself an extra couple hours really just to sleep or sleep in. And I plan to use that time to work. But I was on my way to work at a university. And I'm like, how am I supposed to hold space for these graduate students if I'm not holding space for myself? So,
Absolutely.
yes, so thank you for that. Now, I want to really get into the meat of our discussion today. Can you
Yeah,
tell us a bit about how this topic became such, like, just so prevalent in your life and your experience in your doctoral program?
absolutely. So I was in the middle of my doctorate program. I started in August of 2019, so like right before the pandemic. Um, so the first couple months of my program ran normally, and then we were kind of struck with everything with the pandemic and figuring out how to work full time, just like everybody else in this field, and figure everything out was so difficult. And so that kind of started my like stress that I had. My husband had just come off of a deployment right before I started my program. Um, and then in June of 2020, basically overnight, I became a mom. We adopted our daughter, and so became the mom to a 10-year-old. And just so many things were happening all at one time. And so I was really just in autopilot, like going through the motions. And I think we do that so often. Like we just kind of go through the motions. And if, like, for example, if you weren't being mindful today of what energy you had, then you end up, not having what you can to give to the students that you're teaching. So I have always been kind of ran an autopilot. And I think part of that has to do with ADHD, just kind of like trying to do so much all at once. And so, anyways, there was a lot going on. And for the first time, probably in my life, I just like looked around and I was like, okay, I either have to forget this program, like I have to leave this program, which I didn't want to do. I was fully in it, had done all the coursework and just needed to do my research project. Or I needed to be vulnerable and either ask for help or start over, which is what I ended up doing. I was studying animal assisted therapy. And that was a whole lit review, but it was a messy lit review that was not going to get me to the end. So truly being vulnerable and just reaching out to the program director and saying, I don't know what to do. And again, I think I had always had, the executive function skills, had the skills to kind of like figure it out. But you can't really figure it out with a 200-page
Hmm.
paper and with actual research and actual participants. And so that was really humbling for me because I never thought I would have to stop something, but I don't know. I did not know what to do. So got a great therapist, got kind of started looking at the research behind mindfulness and realized that, okay, well, maybe the topic that I had chose, was important to me, but this one truly, I think, chose me. And just
Yeah.
um, having that information and the science behind what was happening, like in my body and then also in my brain, and kind of that intersection of the two, I felt really empowered by learning all of that science. And it's like, if you have to learn it anyways, because you have to read a lit review, you might as well learn it. So you might as well help yourself in some way if you can. So that's what I did. But it was the first time for me that I really had to um, just step back and pause and say, I've got to figure something out instead of running an autopilot, because it wasn't going to work. I wasn't going to graduate.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely co-sign the running on autopilot because they say it's like having 1,000 different tabs open
Hmm.
in your head, and yeah,
Absolutely.
so yeah, definitely bound to burn out in that way. I'm thinking about, the speech therapists who are on autopilot day in and day out, and they might have speech therapy in whatever setting it is, especially in the hospitals or in the school settings where it's just really go, 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 go.
Hmm.
based on your findings, we didn't get into the research yet, but I want to get this before I forget the question.
Yeah.
Based on your findings, what advice can you give to them to better handle their own executive functioning skills so that way they can teach the children how to manage their.
Yes, that's a great question. And I think, for one, and I don't like have the science of it in my brain, but make like to tell you, but, multitasking and, I really have been for myself trying to not multitask, because if you do have all those tabs open and you are, doing too many different things at one time, you're actually like tiring yourself out, and it's not as helpful. So what I found truly to be helpful is time blocking in my day, instead of and just kind of thinking of the few things that I know I have to do and making sure the time blocks are in for those things, um, and sticking to those time blocks. And if I do start to find myself doing something else, um, catching myself, because that is also, that happens all the time. I try to keep a Post-it note next to me to keep like a little parking lot of things that I almost just went to do, like keep a
Mhm.
list of my side tasks for when my block of time is done. But I think that's really important. And also just, and I don't know when we want to talk about this, but really the mindfulness piece, like actively practicing mindfulness meditation when you can, and realizing that um, that's not the time that it's supposed to necessarily be relaxing. As a person with ADHD, I find it incredibly stressful to meditate, and people say that all the time. But when I started to understand that it's like working a muscle, so that like in the moment of stress later, you are aware of what's happening and can pause and step back and be like, oh, wait a second. Even just the thought of, oh, before I switch tasks. And I think I'm able to do that at this point because I've kind of honed in those mindfulness muscles. But the good, or the relaxing part for me, at least, is never the meditation. I never really, I mean, I like it, but some days I have to make myself do it, just like going to the gym.
Yeah, because I remember you actually saying that that was one thing you wanted to mention is how mindfulness, when we think of mindfulness, we always see like the pictures and the icons of people meditating.
Mm-hmm.
And I am guilty of that. Now, I will be the first one to preach that even going to the gym or doing household chores or gardening is a way of
Mm-hmm.
but for me, I started meditating in grad school. That's when I started my meditation practice, even if it was just like 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Now, I will say, even to this point, I'll say, I can get into, I think it's like delta state pretty quickly to where I'm actually like in a meditative state really quickly,
It's amazing.
which is great, but still there's a lot of times where my mind is just going, going, going.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's still someone with practice. So what would you tell someone with ADHD who wants to find other ways to practice mindfulness so that way they can tap into that mindful state before it's.
Yeah. So first, I would say, in line with what you were saying, there are so many other ways to practice mindfulness. And so I don't know why I give this example a lot, and also it's something that I do pretty often, is um, probably because I hate kitchen cleaning. But when you're washing the dishes, and I think it's helpful because there's different sensations in the sorry, I have this on do not disturb, but for some reason that um so when you're washing the dishes, you can just be mindful of the temperature of the water, or your feet on the floor, and those things are super helpful. So realizing you can go out and take a walk and just listen, instead of listening to your thoughts or your worries. Like, try to pay attention to what the sounds that you hear, the birds that you hear, even your feet, like as they hit the ground, just any other thing that you can ground yourself to other than your thoughts. But the thing that has helped me the most too is realizing, even just on the days where I do not want to meditate, where I feel like my brain is doing too many things, those are the days that I probably need it the most, but also just putting on like a 1-minute guided meditation is so helpful and if your mind wanders 10 times during that 60 seconds, like that's great because you are realizing it and bringing yourself back to the present moment. And so I truly think that even doing that is what can help you to prioritize those other moments. And the other thing that I do a lot, if I don't feel like doing it, is like put on a guided meditation and like while you're driving in your car, and just obviously don't close your eyes, don't follow those things, but like let your brain do what the guided meditation is telling you to do in a way that is kind of cohesive with whatever you need in that moment, in that day. And the last thing I'll say too is that never once have I ever enjoyed like sitting however they tell you to sit when I meditate. For the only thing I can do in those moments, if I try to do that, is like it just never works. So most of the time I meditate laying down, because that's what allows me to actually meditate. And like nobody's going to come to my house and be like, actually, you're not doing
Right.
right. But there's that perfectionistic piece, the piece that's like, I need to like white knuckle this and do it the way I'm supposed to do it. And it's like, but who says that? And especially if, for me, doing it that way has allowed me to meditate for longer instead of like just kind of forcing myself to do it. So I think modifying it in any way that you need to is super important, because again, it's more like an exercise in those moments than it is doing it right, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and really it's like who's to say what the right way is? I think
Right.
people, especially if you're new to meditation, might look at meditation like the Buddhist, monks and
Mm-hmm.
photography of that. But I meditate laying down too. That's my favorite way to meditate,
Same.
honestly. And sometimes I'll even take meditation naps. I call them meditation siestas.
Oh yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
like that.
I need that. I need that. And so, yeah, Alice said meditation is starting to be her favorite pastime.
That's
And,
awesome.
I've just noticed so many benefits to my mental health. Now, the archetype of the speech pathologist who is so overwhelmed with all of the things, the life things, the caseload things, the difficult cases on those caseloads, and then the speech pathologist who pulls up into her parking lot of her job and starts bawling, crying, or
Mhm.
graduate student who just doesn't know how they're going to finish the semester and is just bawling, crying at the overwhelm. What advice would you give to them in that moment?
First, I would say like that is hard, and I think we've all been there at some point. But truthfully, what I found is that if you keep ignoring that stress, and you keep ignoring, if you keep just thinking, I'm just going to keep going, I'm just going to keep going, which is not necessarily ignoring it because you're feeling it.
Mhm.
But if you keep kind of putting yourself on the back burner and just keep going, it's so much more like it's adding more stress to your body and keeping you in that fight or flight state. Um, and just realizing that, just awareness and acknowledging it is the first step to figuring out what the next step is. And so I think, truthfully, my my thought there is like reach out to someone who you trust, like either in your job or outside of your job. Have those conversations and build that community, and um, don't just feel like you have to suffer through everything um, just to get to the next day, because I just don't know that we're supposed to be in this like life where we're like, oh, I hate my job. Like we all went into this field because we have a why and we love what we do. And truthfully, there's really no way to continue to do that and show up in the best way that we can for our clients, if you don't acknowledge your own stress, because it's completely reasonable that we're all under an incredibly high amount of stress just based on the way that the world is. And so I think reaching out and asking for help. And then, I mean, I really do think I wanted nothing to do with meditation or mindfulness. And the science behind it truthfully changes some of those parts of your brain that are more sensitive to stress. And so if you can bring yourself from a 10 to a 7, you have a little bit more space to deal with those stressful moments.
Yes, and thank you for saying that. I do want to see what Nancy Schaefer.
Yeah.
She says, I enjoy meditating, but I have trouble doing it consistently. I have a hard time maintaining routines. And she was just recently diagnosed with ADHD. So welcome to the club.
Welcome, Nancy. She's great. I love her.
Yeah,
yeah, and I think for me, the routine of it, I mean, the biggest part for me has been not, I mean, just trying not to be hard on myself when I am not, if I miss a day, or if I miss, if I miss it, the best you can do is think, okay, if I realize that I didn't do it, then at least I'm being mindful of that. And like, that is that mindfulness muscle getting stronger. So I love the 10% Happier app because they kind of give you little check marks every day. And I have to like try not to like throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say. If I like miss a day, if I was on a streak and then I get discouraged, I think that it's so important to truthfully just the biggest thing about any of these things that we're doing to manage our stress is that we're not supposed to be hard on ourselves about them. And with my research study, a big piece to me was, I didn't want this to be something that was made the participants' lives more stressful. So like, if you're stressed about your stress management, then like, that doesn't help you. So,
yeah.
and so I've had to just learn to be graceful with myself, or to give myself grace, because it is very difficult to maintain a routine, especially with ADHD, but also just in general. There's a lot going on. And so if you miss a day, or if you miss a day of anything that you're trying to do, it can't be the end of the world. Just try again tomorrow.
Yeah. And I do thank you for showing that grace, because even I forget sometimes that I have ADHD. And so I'm just like, why does it feel so exhausting trying to keep up with a routine or anything? So yeah, I do thank you for saying that. Now, I don't think that we actually got into your study.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Could you tell us a bit about your study?
Sure. So part of the capstone requirement at Rocky Mountain, where I went, is to do a capstone study. And so they're not large investigations. So, my findings, I just feel like I have to say, are not like, they're not groundbreaking, because it was a study of 3 participants. However, it does give us some good information, and a lot of the mindfulness research out there is based on the 8-week, like, traditional MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction program. And so the thing that struck me when I was looking at the research was that, especially if you're looking at healthcare workers, so not just SLPs, but doctors, nurses, social workers, the rate of the dropout rates in those studies, specifically for healthcare workers, are so much higher, which tells us, okay, it is because, there's a lot on our plates. And so my biggest, the biggest need that I saw was like, how do we do this, or how do I conduct this research study in a way that hopefully makes an impact, but also doesn't end up with a really high amount of dropout? And really considering that the dropout rate is probably because if we're adding something stressful to our plate, it's too difficult, especially when you're in in this field, like if you're a person who's helping other people.
Mhm.
So that was like my, my like brief introduction to like just knowing that that's a big part of the why. But so I use my participants, there were three, they were all SLPs who worked in healthcare. All of them worked with pediatric clients, but the inclusion criteria was that they were in healthcare, so clinics or home health or anything like that. They all reported at the beginning of the investigation a moderate amount of stress, and then what I had them do was use the 10% Happier app, and there are two modules or two courses in there, the Basics 1 and Basics 2 courses. And it's those together make 15 days. And then each of the days, there's a little lesson, like a brief lesson on some aspect of mindfulness. One of the either foundational, or one of the foundations of mindfulness, or what to do when your mind wanders, just things like that. And then there's a short guided meditation. And I am almost positive for a really long time it was, and I think it still is, the first one of those courses is free if you just download the app. So you don't have to pay for any additional, subscription or anything. The thing also that I like about it is that the modules are between 6 and 17 minutes, and they like slowly and incrementally get a little bit longer every day. So that's another way to build a habit, is like, just doing a little bit more each day instead of starting with 30 minutes and, getting discouraged if you can't do that. So that's, for me, that was the app I used, and they were one of the only apps that was willing to let me use their app for research. Most of the other apps are really cautious about who they let do research, which kind of speaks to, the fact that they're willing to let somebody else do it and it's not like an internal investigation. There's more reliability in that information. So it's always important to be cautious. Like, if another app out there is saying, oh, we improved this, well, did they do the research? And just to think about that is important. Now, most likely it is a lot of the other apps have that same amount of foundational information and is good. Obviously I can only speak to what I looked at, but so what I found throughout the investigation, all three participants had statistically significant decreases in their stress, which is exciting. And then I had them complete a mindfulness, like a trait mindfulness survey at the beginning and the end. And two of the three had increases in their mindfulness traits, but that's not enough to say that it doesn't confirm very much, or it wasn't statistically significant because it was only two of the three. And so I can't say that it's going to like all the way help you be more mindful, but as far as just the encouragement in the study, it did decrease their stress, which the good part of that is it's a practical, easy to access way to decrease your stress. And that's what we need. Like, I just don't think we need things that are more stress for us. So knowing that you can decrease your stress with just, something that you can get on your phone was very promising to me. So
Yes. Well, thank you for taking the time and energy and just the knowing of doing that research study. I have to ask, what are the mindfulness traits? What exactly is that?
So one of them is like that, having an attitude of like non-judgmentalness. So like when you're meditating, if you do, when your mind starts to wander, not if, when that happens, just like having you don't get down on yourself. You don't judge yourself. You just say like, oh, there it is. there's a thought, I'm thinking about dinner or whatever, or I don't know, something I said in third grade, uh,
Uh-huh.
and then you just like kind of let it go by. So like being non-judgmental, I think having a beginner's mind is another one of them. And so um, just like letting yourself be new at something and not being upset that you're not, you know, immediately getting into that delta state, or just being forgiving of ourselves. I'm trying to think of what the other ones are. They're escaping me, but I think there's 5 or 6. Maybe just being present is one.
Yes, and I mean, when they do come back, because trust me, I say on the show all the time that my train of thought will leave me in mid-sentence. So
Oh,
when it comes back, let me know, and I would love to collaborate on a post or put it in the show notes.
yeah, absolutely. I can send you them. And
Yes.
they may come back like somewhere in the middle. You never know.
Yeah, I know, and then that's when I, like, quickly write it down. So one more question that I do have for you. I'm thinking about the praxis preppers, and I want to know how you would recommend preparing for the SLP praxis exam. I just ran a poll on Instagram. Now, a lot of SLPs and grad students are unsure if they have ADHD. They actually have imposter syndrome about the ADHD because they're like, do I have it? I don't know, but I know I struggle to focus and I know I'm having trouble managing my tasks. Which, by the way, whether or not you're diagnosed with ADHD, if you know you're having executive functioning issues, that doesn't mean that you are the problem. That means that there are just certain strategies that you need. Just a side note.
Yeah.
Um, but navigating limiting beliefs, the imposter syndrome, the anxiety. And so, just with your knowledge and what you do on a day to day basis, what advice can you give to them?
Um, First, I will say that I probably spent like so much of my time since graduate school or since my diagnosis literally thinking like, oh, I don't actually have ADHD. I just like need these strategies or need this medicine, or like these things just help me, but like maybe I don't actually have it, which is like the craziest thing because all those things help me because my brain works a little bit differently. So, um, I definitely understand that perspective, I guess. And I think it also has to do with that just like internalized um, shame associated with like maybe just not always doing things in a super neurotypical way. And so I think we're shifting our mindsets away from that, but it's hard. And I really have had to tell myself like the grace that I have with my clients or my friends or anybody, I should probably extend that to myself as well. And so I would tell them that. But like so last semester, well, not last semester, last year before I started my new job, where I'm working from home, my last graduate student she had a lot of test anxiety about the praxis. And so of course, as a person who loves a good rabbit hole and a good research rabbit hole, I like dove right in for her. But I don't know if you're familiar with Sion Bialox research.
Mm.
Okay, it's super like, so she looked at expressive writing right before a test. So basically, let me see. Like I literally wrote this down because it's gonna go away. But it's basically a mindset tip. It's not necessarily anything about studying, but so they suggest, or the researchers suggest, that writing about your thoughts right before an exam, so maybe 10 minutes outside in the car before you go for your praxis, or I guess now people like take it at their houses, so like in the living room before you go into the like secure area. If you just write down all the things that you're nervous about, and this can work for any high pressure situations, job interview, before you go on to a podcast, although I won't lie, I didn't do it today, but I probably should have. That writing about that like anything that you're feeling. So the students that wrote about their worries for 10 minutes immediately before taking an important exam performed better on the exam than those who didn't do it. And people who, or the students who reported higher test anxiety actually had a larger margin of doing or performed even better than those who didn't report having test anxiety. So I think literally just writing 10 minutes about the things you're worried about. And they say that it probably frees up your cognitive resources from that anxiety to make them available for the test itself. And so I really like that tip because, again, I'm all about things that don't cost time or energy, especially when you're a person who either is a little bit anxious or worried or anything. So I like things that help us that don't cost time or energy. So
Thank you so much. That tip, I'm already just thinking about different ways I can share
yeah.
this community, because just the point of freeing up cognitive resources.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Because when we're feeling that stress in our body, it's just, the fight or flight, like what you mentioned earlier, is set off. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. And I'll share, I can share the article with you if you want, so you can have it. I'll share it with you after to either share with whoever or just, yourself to read. I don't know that people like reading research as much as I do. She also has a good TED Talk.
Okay. Yeah, the TED Talk too. I know nowadays it's hard for us to get through a whole article, but I like to look at the articles and then repurpose them, present them in a new way, just like us content creators. But
yeah.
So, thank you. So one final question I like to ask my guests, and some people say it's a loaded question. What changes would you like to see in speech pathology and really overall healthcare?
Yeah, it is a loaded question. I think that shifting our focus to our own well-being and our own self-care is really critical. And I think that I hope, I know that we didn't talk about it in my graduate program. And I've said this a few times recently, like in posts or in things. And a few people have said, oh yeah, no, we did talk about that in my program. Like we did talk about mindfulness. And so that's encouraging, right? But I think just the whole, system, just talking about the things that are stressful, no matter what it is, whether it's culture or, all of the things that are really stressful, talking about them is what is going to help us maybe respond instead of just reacting. And I think that's what we need in our profession. We need to start responding. And I think it's happening. It's really, it's slow and the changes are small, but it's happening more than it was, I think, prior to social media being as much as it is, and just letting us connect in different ways. These conversations and other conversations are able to be, we're having them, and that's important. And I think I don't know. I think shifting our focus to that, just being more aware and conscious, and just being conscious, we just have to make that shift.
Wow, thank you. And we do need to make that shift. So thank you for contributing to the research and the conversations about it.
Well, and thank you for having the conversations, because, in preparing to do this, I was, the variety of different conversations you're having is so critical. So I thank you for having them.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. I want people to check out your Instagram page because I can tell you pour a lot into it. Can you tell us where to contact you?
Absolutely. So Instagram or TikTok, both I try to post. It's Dr. Angelyn Franks. And Yeah. And if anyone, I love these conversations and I would love to, continue them in those places. And um, just knowing, I'm super new to content creation. Like I don't know very much or how to do it. So um, I just, appreciate any, all those connections, the connections with people, because that's the biggest thing for me. Just connecting and having these conversations is so critical.
Yes, and I definitely second that because, when we got connected with each other, I'm like, "We really just need to take this whole conversation and put a."
Yeah, like I saw your stuff and I was like, wait, this is good. And I think the mindfulness space is it's not like it's people aren't having these conversations, but I think um I just think more often than not I hear like, oh, I can't do that, or I don't want to do that. And I think thinking of it as something that isn't necessarily like meditation, but really just being more mindful and just being more present with each other or with ourselves is so important.
Oof, yes, and there's a whole other conversation because we could
Right.
go into that.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Angelyn, for coming on the show,
Thank
and thank
you.
you everyone, for joining and those watching the replay. Was there something you wanted to say, Dr. Angelyn?
No, no, no. I was just saying yes, thank you.
Yay. So yeah, so whoever's coming on, I will be posting this replay. And those watching the replay, please check out the show notes for Dr. Angelyn's contact information and the research that she just mentioned. And we will look forward to seeing you tomorrow, where we talk to Adana Burrell about being a Black speech language pathologist, doing all of the things and navigating pivots. Until then, thank you
Awesome.
so much, Dr. Angelyn.
Thank you.